Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a great pleasure to be at WORKTECH, one of my favorite conferences, and a great pleasure to be in Buenos Aires, one of my favorite cities. So this is a very good moment for me, and it's also a moment when I am here to talk to you about a new book which I have written, part of a long-term interest in the future of the workplace. It's called Life of Work, and I'm going to be sharing some of my thoughts and ideas about the future of the workplace based on the book. This is the only copy in Latin America currently. It's actually, the bulk copies will be available early in the new year, but I thought I'd give you a preview of what's inside the pages, and it fits very well with the themes of this conference. So, gents? Yes. So, a little bit about my background. I'm a research professor at the Royal College of Art in London. It is one of the most famous and long-standing art and design schools in the world. It goes back to the early Victorian time. We're over 175 years old. But actually, a lot of what we think about at the RCA is the future of design, and workplace is one of our interests, and I head the university's largest research group looking at design in a whole range of contexts. So the life of work is very much dealing with a central paradox of modern office design, is that a lot of workplaces are lifeless, that they don't have the buzz and animation, they're not great places to work, and it seems that after 40, 50 years of exploring issues of efficiency and streamlining and modern ideas in design, we're still some way from thinking about how we make offices more humane, more connected, and more addressing the psychological well-being of the people who work in them. And this book is the result of a 4-year research project that was funded primarily by Haworth, the global furniture company, who were very interested in looking long range at how things might develop. So, what did we really need to learn about the workplace? And we started from the point that much current workplace design is static, it's inflexible, and critically, it's psychologically impoverished. And you'll be hearing a lot of that term this morning. And so what we decided to do was to look outside of the office. It's often referencing only itself. And we decided to look at other environments and spaces and settings that might give us inspiration for change. And we've all visited offices like this. This is a very expensive management consultancy in London, and there was an expose on British television in which people said, you know, my first visit to this building was, oh no, do I have to work in a place like this? They'd followed all the classic principles of efficiency and lean working, but it didn't make an attractive workplace. And we wanted to get to the bottom of why. 2 pieces of research in the field of literature we surveyed were particularly important in guiding our work. The first is this one by Dr. Jacqueline Vischer. She's a French-Canadian environmental psychologist, and she came up with the comfort model, 3 levels of comfort in the workplace. So the first level is physical comfort. Is the building too hot or too cold? Will you actually get your eye scratched out as you walk down a corridor? Now, most buildings are, because of health and safety laws, they're now physically comfortable. The next level is functional comfort. Have we got the right environment for people to carry out their work? Is the glare on a screen, is the air quality good enough to sit in a room for 8 hours? And designers have largely concentrated with furniture and ergonomics to make a functionally comfortable environment. But the third level, and this is the really important level, is the uncharted territory of workplace design. And this is psychological comfort, ideas of well-being and belonging, of ownership, of engagement with the organization for whom you're working and with the colleagues with whom you're collaborating. And this is the area that's unexplored in workplace design. If you look at absenteeism from the workplace and sick rates, and Britain has one of the worst records in this respect along with America, you'll notice that actual physical injuries in the workplace have gone down. We've got better at dealing with back pains and musculoskeletal problems, but we've got much worse at dealing with mental health, with psychological disassociation from the workplace. So this was a very important piece of research. We were also very interested in the British psychologist Craig Knight. For his PhD, he carried out a series of studies to test productivity and well-being. And what he did was he set up an experiment in which individuals had to complete tasks in terms of speed, comprehension, and accuracy in processing information. And all the conditions were in a single person enclosed office with just a window and some furniture and a paper and pencil. And so the people had to do the tests, first of all, in a lean space. And then they put some photographs and some plants in the space. And they had to do the tests in an enriched space. And then they had to do it in an empowered space where they were allowed themselves to organize up to 6 plants and photographs in the space. And guess what happened? Productivity went up by as much as 32%, and errors went down. The more control people had over their environment, the more they were productive and felt better about the space. Productivity and well-being were working hand in hand. Of course, then there was another loop to the experiment where the researcher came in and reorganized all of the paintings and pictures, and productivity went straight down. People were resentful of interference. So this told us a lot about the relationship between what we would call process and experience. It seems that we have a lot of offices which are very focused on process, management efficiency, getting things done, achieving tasks and goals and targets. But they tend to produce rather soulless environments. On the other hand, we've now got a growing set of examples of offices which are all about the experience. They're funky, they're cool, they're playgrounds, but people don't get things done. And it seems that office design swings between process-driven design and experience-driven design, when what we really need is a balance between the two. So this was very important in framing our study. We were also very interested in the relationship between individual processes and individual experiences and group processes and group experiences. Most office research concentrates on the individual and it doesn't talk about process. So we began to pick environments outside of the workplace that could tell us about all of these things. And we developed a study, and this is a kind of matrix which shows you what we were looking at. We decided that we would look at both individual and group processes, and that we would look at both individual and group experiences. And to do that, we would look at academic libraries as an exemplar of a knowledge workplace in which individuals work. We would look at stage design as an exemplar of managing the psychological experience of the individual. We would look at the city and temporary urban events like festivals and pop-ups as a way of managing group interaction and group experience. And finally, we would look at extreme teams, people for whom teamwork is absolutely critical, hospital emergency teams, air traffic control, and so on. And we developed a project with 4 interlocking studies. So let me take you through those studies. So the first one is the academic library. And if you've ever been in academic libraries, and I'm sure we all have, they are in many ways the ultimate knowledge environment. And in recent years, especially in Britain, there's been huge innovation in the architecture and design of academic libraries. They don't call them libraries anymore. They call them knowledge hubs and ideas factories, and they give them all new names. And universities are putting a lot more interest on social learning and teamwork and collaborative activities. And we were interested in how the individual moves through these new spaces. And what we found was that although new technology is driving a lot of the development of new libraries, we found that physical space was still incredibly important. And here's what one researcher said. Research is more than a digital thing, it's a living, breathing thing. So the spaces where you talk, write, think are really important. So we put together a small qualitative research sample of researchers, both in the corporate and the academic sector, ranging from digital natives who've been brought up using digital technologies and digital immigrants, mainly older people, experienced, but who have learnt their research methods in a pre-digital era. And we shadowed them, and we studied them, and we interviewed them. And what we did was come up with what we call a generic research journey. So what you've got is a process in which people are interacting with the library in different ways to discover information, to gather and assimilate it, to analyze it, to create new knowledge, and to share that new knowledge. And we found that was a pretty generic activity for everything. And there are lots of different ways you can describe. At each of these 5 stages, we began to see what we would call a generic knowledge cycle. And for each of our researchers, we created their own maps. And if you look at the yellow on the screen, that's the amount of time they're spending in the library. No 2 researchers are interacting with the library, the knowledge workplace, if you like, in the same way. And where were they going when they weren't in the library? Well, they were working in all kinds of different places, including The Economist on the right of your screen was going to Hampstead Heath and going for long walks, and that was where they were doing their great work. And what we discovered was that at different stages of the knowledge process, you have different needs. During the discover phase and partially through the gather phase, people liked social animation and buzz. The space could be more open, it could be noisier, less room was needed, there was more mobility. But when you got into the analysis of information, the close personal scrutiny of data, and the creation of new knowledge, you needed quieter spaces. The spaces need to be enclosed. You needed more room to spread things out, and you were moving around a lot less. And out of this study, we developed a whole series of generic concepts for different types of spaces that would allow people to work in new ways. I'll just show you a couple. A very simple, mobile, lightweight, flexible canopy. So in an open space area, you can then create a kind of semi-private enclosed office. And an event box where you've got a kit of parts opening out various into a mini auditorium where you can share ideas and test your ideas and get feedback, this kind of idea of the event box. And there were, in total in the study, there were 9 different concepts which are in the book. And what the knowledge workplace study of academic libraries told us, that knowledge gathering and assimilation and creation has different stages, and they require different settings. So, having studied knowledge processes, we were then very, very interested to look at the individual psychological experience of people in offices. And who better to tell us about them than stage designers? If you go to the theatre, you may be in an auditorium with lots of different people. But it's not a shared experience. You're watching a play or an opera or a dance. It's going on inside your head. It's your personal psychological experience. And stage designers do the opposite of what many office designers do. And the century-long drive for management efficiency has tended to end up over 100 years with the type of offices we know so well, with suspended ceilings, with rectilinear grids, and so on. And if you think of your experience day to day in the office and your experience in the theatre, where there is light and colour and atmosphere and vista, and your emotions are being psychologically manipulated, it's incredibly different. Now, some offices, and this is Quicksilver's Boardwalk, have a narrative approach, but these tend to be highly customized and expensive, and they're difficult to build and to replicate. So the question we were asking was, can we create workplace settings with mood and atmosphere and shared culture that will create a psychologically enriched psychological experience for office workers, but in an economical way? And to that we turned to the masters of manipulating our senses, stage designers, and the language of the theatre. And we were particularly interested, we did a lot of archival research in terms of theatre pioneers of the modernist period, such as Edward Gordon Craig and Adolphe Appia, who were working in Europe in the late 19th century, in roughly the same period, when stage sets stopped being realist or painted flats and started being abstract and minimalist. And the cherry orchard would just be one purple light on a grey gauze with some birdsong. And out of their work, we studied their approach to light and shadow, to projection and effects. We looked at levels in the theatre. And all of these elements are readily accessible and available within workplace design. We looked at screens. They're used bureaucratically in offices, but in the theatre, they're dramatic devices. And we looked at colour. And we looked at vista and framing and how you create perspective and a sense of mystery in space. And we began to commodify. We began to, not to create a reductive process, but to try and get a handle on a grasp of how you might explore these things. So, screens, we identified 4 generic types: movable, top-hung, malleable, and static scenic. Colour could be graphic or saturate or layered or a wash. And gradually we built up a whole vocabulary of effects that you could apply in the workplace. It doesn't cover everything in the stage designer's arsenal, but it covers a lot of the main ideas. And you can see how, by retrospectively analysing good contemporary workplace design, you can see how architects are already using these ideas. This is Macquarie in Australia, and you can see the different light temperature between the 2 spaces, the framing of a quiet, private concentration zone with deep colours, with saturated colour and top lighting and a vista going forwards. We tested these ideas in co-design workshops with lots of architects and designers and said, can you work with these components? The idea of creating a kit of parts, almost like an office furniture system, but for the more intangible psychological enrichment tools, such as colour and texture and vista and framing and so on. And they came up with their own ideas of how you might develop a more psychologically enriched environment for the experience of the individual. And we tested the concept, taking bland, efficient offices and just doing very simple visual exercises. This is with top-hung screens. And a very little change, just the addition of some minor insertions, some top-hung screens with colour, create a very different atmosphere. And we began to explore, this is a concentration setting, the use of different light and colour and screening. Very minimal means, but maximum effect. So this study, this second study, taught us a lot about individual experience. So from there, we moved to our third study. And this was the study of the city, the study of temporary urban events, the city as a curated space, the city as a place of unpredictable, flexible, exciting things happening that bring people together in an interactive way. And we know that we are working in the city in a much more distributed way with Wi-Fi and mobile devices. The workplace no longer has the hold on us. We can work anywhere. The city is, in a sense, a workplace. Whereas 20 years ago, people were trying to make the workplace into a city. We also know that when people come into the office, they do so in order to interact with others. Work in the workplace is a social activity. Yet offices are so static and inflexible, and they don't change. They're immutable. And we thought, well, the city is full of living, rich colour. It's full of random interaction, this dynamic patina of happenings. We'd learn from things like why create a cinema in a stairwell, or I don't know whether you have it in Buenos Aires, but a parking day where they take parking slots and turn it into a mini park for the day. So they book the parking space for a day, and they make a park and invite people to. They play music, and it's a beautiful, beautiful idea. And so we looked particularly at markets with their cheap, flexible structures and their food and their ambience. We looked at festivals, very exciting, pulling people together, dramatic structures, ideas. We looked at interventions. This is called the magic carpet. This is in Stuttgart in Germany, where a cold, windy public square is made into an urban garden. And we looked at pop-ups. This is the artist Jeremy Deller's work. This is Stonehenge, a pop-up plastic Stonehenge. And we were very interested in social interaction. We were very interested in, why do people congregate? Why do they feel comfortable in these types of informal, spontaneous settings when they don't feel comfortable in the well-upholstered office? We were interested in communication, the simplicity and directness, the chalkboard that tells you what's for lunch, the simple coloured vinyl tape that's on the floor that directs you through a space. And this is a fun thing in London, creating a pop-up zebra crossing so that people can cross the road. And there's all kinds of things going on in the physical environment, how they use furniture, how they use food. Could we translate that into the office environment? And once again, we created this vocabulary of effects. We looked at structures, orientation, boundaries and thresholds. We looked at furniture. We looked at identity. And we began to develop this language. And we tested it with architects and designers. And we created a game, a board game in which they were working and trying to use the city as a set of cues for a more socially engaged, a better group experience in the workplace. And we began to, in team space, we began to explore new ideas, a more flexible, modular, architecturally independent set of structures that you could take up and put down. And in social space, we looked at something that was much more comfortable, much more along the lines of the agora, the ancient Greek concept of a public space, which is also a workspace. So for our final study, we looked at individual processes with the academic library. We looked at individual psychological experiences with the world of the theatre. And we looked at group experiences through the spontaneous social interactions of the urban environment. The final piece of the jigsaw for us was to look at critical team processes, where group work is absolutely essential. And so we decided to identify extreme teams, ambulance, paramedics, accident and emergency, air traffic control. We started in the newsroom of Sky Television, one of Europe's biggest rolling 24-hour news. And we asked ourselves, under constantly changing a news agenda and under extreme pressure with people coming and going 24 hours a day, how are they producing very high-quality news programs? And it was very, very interesting to see how they were processing information so quickly. We looked at accident and emergency, and we've done a lot of research in this area. As well as a workspace lab, we also have a healthcare research lab at the RCA. And what goes on in accident and emergency departments is incredible. The way they prioritize the most sick and injured, the way they act quickly, often with very large teams, moving all types of equipment and medication and specialist processes into place in real time. It was very, very interesting. And similarly, we spent some time up the tower in East Midlands Airport with air traffic controllers, looking at their group processes. You can't be an individualist when you are on an air traffic control team. You can't be an individualist doing your own work when you're in accident and emergency. These are extreme teams. You have to work with other people. And the physical setting and the furniture and the environment has to support you. You haven't got time to find the right chair or the right tool. Exactly what is going on when a plane approaches the control tower at East Midlands Airport? What is going on when a seriously injured road accident victim is brought into the accident and emergency department? And we began to realize what was needed. Each team needed a common language. Each team needed a clear sense of what their roles and responsibilities were. Each team needed to react quickly with a minimum of friction or distraction. And for that to happen, there has to be a coordinated effort in group processes. You need the right resources, you need the right technology, you need the right training, and you need the right environment with the right air quality, the right lighting, the right ergonomic furniture. And it has to be there. And there are no excuses. You can't, you can't take a day off from air traffic control or we'll all die. So it's a very, very interesting piece of research. So we analysed all of this, and it's been a process of assimilation, and we've been working not only with Haworth but also with Philips Lighting on the lighting side of what the future workplace could be like. What could the life of work be so that it's less lifeless, that it supports psychological comfort, back to Jacqueline Vicha's idea. And all of these ideas we expressed in the book. We wanted to build the links between well-being and productivity, going back to Craig Knight's ideas and his experiments. And most of all, we wanted to create a simple model that would not be prescriptive, but would act as a framework or as a guide. And the end of the book, I talk about something, and I wrote the book with a very good architect called Imogen Privet, who's my PhD student. And we talked about a new language of design that we call flex. And flex stands for flexible, legible, experiential, and comfortable. It should be fleck, but flex actually is the word in English that encompasses the idea of what we're talking about. And flexibility requires us to think about designing settings that offer choice and can be tuned to varying short-term needs and can be adapted more easily to changing requirements over time. So flexibility is incredibly important. Legible environments should be easily and intuitively read by their users and incorporate visual cues to make that happen. Experiential spaces are designed as complete environments, and this is really where the stage design stuff comes through, projecting atmosphere and mood and enhancing culture. And finally, a comfortable environment is where employees feel welcome, relaxed, and supported. The stuff is just there when they need it, how they need it. And this is the framework that we've developed. And I think that the academic library helped us explore how you build and share knowledge and the settings that will be required for that. The theatre design was about psychologically and experientially enriched settings. The city showed us how to create flexible and adaptable settings for social interaction, which is going to be more and more important because we're only going to the office to socially interact with others because we can work anywhere. And finally, the extreme teams showed us, at critical points in any process, environment, training, and culture have got to be exactly right. So that is the Flex model, and this is the Life of Work book. And I hope that as we go on our journey through WORKTECH Buenos Aires today, and you're going to hear from some fantastic speakers, I hope that the ideas that I've dropped into the conference right at the top of the event, I hope they'll resonate with you. I'm very happy now to take some questions. You'll be very glad that I didn't deliver this talk in Spanish, because as some of my Buenos Aires friends, hello Eduardo, hello Monica, no, my Spanish is terrible, learnt on a beach in Spain, and I thank the translators who I hope have put this message across, but I'm very now happy to take questions. Muchas gracias.